Senator Waters. Senator Stoker.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I rise today to speak in support of the Morrison Government's Paid Parental Leave Amendment Flexibility Measures Bill. It will provide more flexibility for Australian working mothers and fathers and their families to access paid parental leave at a really important time in a new child's life. Flexibility in this field is really important to help families, and that's something that this government has in mind in every single one of its measures. Self-employed and working families in particular will benefit greatly from these measures, and it aligns the incentives for working women to keep doing what they're doing to keep the economy going, to build a better future for themselves, to build a better future for their families. So these amendments will allow the mothers of newborn or adopted children to use an initial 12-week period of paid parental leave before taking up the remaining entitlement of 6 weeks at any time over the course of 2 years following the birth or adoption of a child. Now, at present, without this bill having been passed, a parent who takes paid parental leave has to take it in a block of 18 weeks. You can't tailor it to work part-time, for instance, or to take a block of time that is completely at home and then ease yourself back into work by picking up days on an increasing basis as you get closer towards the end of that 18 weeks worth of time. You can't decide to do occasional blocks of work or decide to do work here and there, either to keep your skills fresh, to maintain professional registrations, or if you're self-employed or in small business, to keep relationships with clients alive, to keep the work coming through the door of your small business. But these changes will provide so much more flexibility that allows people to be able to adapt this period of paid parental leave to better fit with their working life. Now, nobody's here to say that professional women are the most vulnerable in our community. Of course, there's many women who need a hand. But one thing that professional women often say to me, particularly those who are self-employed or who have small businesses of their own, is that the inflexibility of the existing arrangements for paid parental leave make it very difficult for them to maintain their businesses and take a period of time in which they are focusing on their family. So by providing this flexibility, we can help to provide even more ways to improve women's workforce participation. And that was one of the outcomes of the Women's Economic Security Package that was released in 2018. It's worth noting that in the pre-COVID period, one of the accomplishments of this government has been that the women's workforce participation rate was at an all-time high. Now, there's been a little slippage during the COVID period, but this government remains committed to doing everything it can to maximise women's ability to make these kinds of contributions to their families and to the broader economy. These amendments are on top of the government's changes to the work test in the Paid Parental Leave Act in October last year, which already made a number of improvements from that block-like status that the bill had when it was initially implemented. Once this bill, though, has been approved by Parliament, as I hope that it will, parents of children who are born on or after the 1st of July 2020 will be able to exercise this new and more flexible option. The remaining 6 weeks of leave will be able to be used flexibly at any time within 2 years of the date of birth or adoption, in blocks that are as small as a day at a time. It means that should a woman or a parent decide to go back to work and even do a little work before they get to that 18-week period, they don't face the cut-off of the rest of their paid parental leave. Nearly half of new mothers in Australia access paid parental leave, and Of those, it's expected that about 4,000 will choose to adopt these more flexible arrangements. Time will tell, of course, once it's implemented. But it's expected that there will be a number of women in that category in the order of 4,000. These changes support, though, thousands of working women who cannot afford to leave their business for 18 consecutive weeks. When you're employed in arrangements where you can't, for reasons of project management or continuity for clients, go for a period of 18 consecutive weeks, these arrangements allow a better collaboration between the demands of the business or the client and the needs of the family. And it should be the case that we are willing to work together as parents, as employees, as business owners, as employers, to try and make family life and work life gel together as best as is possible. Currently, if a parent returns to work before they have received their full entitlement of paid parental leave pay, they just lose eligibility for the remainder of the payment. So I'm really delighted to see this proactive approach from the Coalition, supporting expectant parents to do the very best they can, particularly in small business and in self-employment, because we know lots of women choose to work in small business, and particularly the small business owner or in self-employment, so that they can manage the flexible nature that they require for caring for their families. It'll ease the transition back into the workforce for primary caregivers, and that is a really wonderful thing. At the moment, taking 18 weeks off in a block, as is required if you wish to access the entirety of the payment, to care for your newborn. If you must take it all in one go, it can amount to a pretty significant blow to one's ability to continue to provide the support that their business needs. It can really harm a self-employed person's ability to bounce back when they decide to come back to work full-time. It's one of the biggest impediments for women in the profession from which I came, and that is young women at the bar. If we want to see women rise to a position of being equally briefed and equally senior in the legal profession and in the bar, then this will make an enormous difference. I understand they're not the neediest people in our community by any stretch, but if we want to see women rising to equal levels across the economy, well, that's just one example of a place where women will benefit greatly from having this flexibility, because at the moment they face the requirement to fully disengage from their business and then build it up from scratch again when they return from leave. And that doesn't even cover the fact that they have all of their usual business expenses to cover during that time too. The flexibility will allow women to choose to return to work and, in something that is quite exciting, transfer the remaining part of the paid parental leave to their partner, who can take on the role of primary carer. What I love about this is that it encourages both parents to share the wonderful opportunity that exists to bond with a new child, but also to manage the impact on work life, on careers, on businesses of taking time off. To the extent that when people talk about a gender pay gap, that gap is attributable to the decision of women to take time off to care for children. Anything we do to encourage the more equal sharing of that opportunity, but also of those costs, is a way that we can help to make sure that we're giving women real choice, but also men real choice about the things that they want to live out in the values of their life. And that involves oftentimes helping them reach their ambition of spending some time as a primary carer and sharing the impact on work life with their wife or partner. Alternatively, of course, a woman may choose to use their remaining paid parental leave to support their part-time return to work, or to gradually increase the amount of work they're doing to help gradually transition their child to getting used to the arrangements for going back to work. So you could take 3 days per week of paid parental leave and choose to work on the other 2, or vice versa. Any arrangement would do, but the beauty of it is that it can be tailored to the circumstances of the individual. And really, choice is what we're all about, because it shouldn't be the case that governments decide from afar when you can and can't care for your child. It shouldn't be the case that governments tell you as an employer what you can and can't do in terms of the arrangements you and an employer might like to make for that person's return to work. Choice and flexibility is about making these challenging times in everyone's life work for everyone. I'm really excited to see a greater uptake of leave by secondary carers who mightn't have had that opportunity to spend quality time with their children. When I had my first child, one of the wonderful things we were able to do as a family was to have my husband take a period of parental leave while I went back to work. And it was an enormous blessing for him. It inducted him in a way of parenting that he wouldn't have risen to quite so quickly if he hadn't been doing that period on his own. And it meant that he and our daughter had a beautiful bond that has endured for the entirety of her life. I hope that continues, but that great start that comes from a father getting to make a choice to spend some time with their children is something that shouldn't be dismissed out of hand and indeed should be encouraged. It has been a wonderful thing for our family, and while I acknowledge that it isn't something everyone can make work, for those that can and for those that want to have that as a part of the choices their family make, well, why should bureaucracy stand in the way? Let's make this flexible. Let's make it work for all families and all families' priorities. I know how important it is to make it viable for women to return to work after having children, and so do all of my colleagues in the Morrison government. Everyone's circumstances are different. You might be employed, part-time, full-time. You might be self-employed, which creates lots of complications when it comes to fitting in a period of leave for children. You might be a small business owner. But we want to make sure that people who are managing all of those responsibilities, and particularly those who don't have the support of an employer and their structures to be able to help them through this time, have the flexibility they need to be able to adapt and change and make it work for their circumstances. So I'm really keen on this bill, and I think it's going to make the arrangements for women in this situation really much improved. There's around 300,000 births in Australia each year. Nearly half of all new mothers access paid parental leave. It'll be wonderful to see more small business owners have the opportunity to keep their business alive while bonding with their new child. It'll be great to see self-employed women continue to progress in their careers whilst enjoying this joyful time of life. And it will be brilliant to see more fathers and partners who may not be the person who delivered a child, nevertheless get the opportunity to form that really tight bond that endures so beautifully throughout life when these special opportunities and the space that is created with this time is when it is seized and when it is really dived into head on. This is a wonderful bill. I commend it to the House, and I only hope that even more than the predicted 4,000 women are able to make it a part of the choices they and their husband or partner choose to make when it's time for them to consider the role that rearing children will play in their family. Thank you.